Alabama, let's get it.
The process, no one can stop this. Hottest show in the streets, I bet you can't top this. Rammer, jammer, yellow hammer, come see how we rock this. Alabama fans the best, there's no way you can top this. Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
Recruiting news and interviews, just sit back and watch this.
The process.
Welcome into The Process, Crimson Tide Recruiting. I am your host, Justin Smith, the scouting and recruiting analyst for Touchdown Alabama magazine. Thank you guys so much for joining me today on our YouTube page. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, drop a like so you can stay updated on all of our content. The Process will run every Tuesday and Thursday evening right here on our YouTube page. And with today being Thursday, a huge day here in the sporting world, as some college football will happen tonight between UAB and Miami, of course, and the NFL will also kick off its football season on this evening as well. And when you look at NFL, you know that fantasy football is a huge part of the National Football League. They are kind of intertwined with one another at this very moment. So I want to bring fantasy football into the college football recruiting world here, as I will break down a fantasy or dream scenario for the Tide here and how they could close out their 2021 recruiting class with the dream or fantasy scenario happening, as it definitely is in play. It is a possibility. It is a dream that can be fulfilled here by the Tide's coaching staff, as I will break down some recruits who I feel the Tide can bring in here in this 2021 recruiting class to finish off this class, who I think will make this class even better. And it will be a dream scenario, as the Tide will be able to pull in these guys. And as I said earlier, it is a dream that can be fulfilled. But before I just give my opinion on that, do have just a few couple of notes or recruiting updates to hit you guys with today, because it hasn't been that much happening in between our last show, which was on Tuesday. But before I get a chance to dive into what my dream scenario could be for the Crimson Tide here in this 2021 recruiting class, do have to hit you guys with those couple of recruiting updates. So with that being said, let's get the process started. Nothing too exciting has happened in between our last show and this show, but I did drop some interesting notes when it comes to the Tide recruiting quarterbacks in the 2022 recruiting class. I dropped those notes in our forum titled Points After on TouchdownAlabama.com. It is a subscriber only benefit to write a message on our forum, so be sure to pick up your subscription to TouchdownAlabama.com today, as I just talked about some interesting developments when it comes to the Tide recruiting 2022 quarterbacks. Also looking at this weekend, as high school football is in full swing in some states and it continues to start in other states. You're looking at two Tide commits who will begin their senior seasons on this weekend. Looking at AJ Hall, the 5-star wide receiver, according to TouchdownAlabama.com, will begin his senior season at Bloomingdale High School on this weekend, along with the Tide's 2021 4-star offensive lineman commit Terence Ferguson, who will begin his senior season at Peach County High School for the Trojans in the state of Georgia. So both of those guys will get an opportunity to begin their senior seasons as the high school football season begins across the nation. Of course, inside the state of Alabama, we are going into our fourth week of high school football. We have a couple of Tide commits included inside the state as well. So that is just something I wanted to update you guys on. As I said, it is a bit on the quieter side when it comes to recruiting at the moment, but recruiting is fluent. Anything can happen at any time, so we'll continue to keep you guys updated on everything surrounding Alabama football recruiting. As I said earlier in the show, I wanted to break down a dream scenario here for the Crimson Tide when it comes to how they could possibly close out their 2021 recruiting class, just based off the guys who are on their recruiting boards. Of course, this is my opinion, just based off the guys who I have seen on film, of course, and watching them in person a couple of times, just breaking down some of the things that I like about their game, some parts of their game that can translate to the next level as well. And I think these guys closing out the Tide's 2021 recruiting class will be a dream scenario, because you feel so many different holes here for the Crimson Tide. And when I look at my list here, just looking at the guys who could close out this 2021 recruiting class for the Crimson Tide, of course, they are looking to add between 26, 27 guys at this moment, with them having 21 verbal commitments. At the moment, I am going to list out 6 guys, which will make that number 27. Just 6 guys who I feel this class will be completed by adding these guys on. And the first guy I want to talk about here is the 5-star athlete Quincy Mckendree out of Pinson Valley High School in Pinson, Alabama. You're getting a pure athlete in Quincy Mckendree. Of course, he will play football and basketball at the next level at the University of Alabama if you chose to sign with the Crimson Tide here during the early signing period or during the traditional signing period. But you're looking at Quincy Mckendree, a guy who will most likely play cornerback at the next level. They want to develop him into a cornerback. I think he is a natural wide receiver, but you can translate him and transform him into a defensive back. You saw the Crimson Tide do that with Trayvon Diggs during his time at the University of Alabama, and now you see what he is doing with the Dallas Cowboys. So you know that it's definitely something that could be done, especially under the Tide's coaching staff. Another guy who I think will make this a dream scenario here for the Crimson Tide when it comes to closing out this 2021 recruiting class is Terence Arnold. You're getting a guy who will most likely play safety if he was to sign with the Crimson Tide and come to Tuscaloosa. But I think the most impressive part about Terence Arnold's game is his work ethic. This is a kid who works from sun up to sundown, it seems, as I got a chance to spend a day with him in Tallahassee, Florida on this past summer. And if he was to roll off his workout schedule to you, it will make you sweat. That's how hard he works. And this is a kid who's really technically sound, trains with a former defensive back who was a former defensive back for Florida State University. And I think he really works hard, as I said, from sun up to sundown. Just like Quincy Mckendree, he will have the opportunity to play both football and basketball at the next level at the University of Alabama if he chose to sign with the Crimson Tide. And moving over here now to the wide receiver position, I think if the Tide was to add Brian Thomas Jr., that would be a huge pickup for the Tide here. Adding him on with the likes of Ja'Cory Brooks, of course, AJ Hall, and also Christian Leary, adding a big physical wide out to that group. When you look at AJ Hall and Ja'Cory Brooks, both guys have some great length, and Christian Leary adding some great speed. Adding Brian Thomas Jr. to that wide receiver group, that group is going to look scary good if the Tide was able to pull in Brian Thomas Jr. and add him to that particular group of guys. Another guy here the Tide could add here that will make this class even stronger, also adding on to that dream scenario here for the Crimson Tide, adding 5-star offensive tackle Amarius Mims to their already impressive offensive line group. You add another offensive tackle to go along with J.C. Latham, and also the 5-star offensive tackle alongside him in Tommy Brockermeyer. You're getting another traditional offensive tackle who will most likely definitely play offensive tackle at the next level. A long, lengthy, athletic kid who really fits that mold of an offensive tackle in today's game. Another great pickup for the Tide, adding him on, of course, with Terence Ferguson, James Brockermeyer, Tommy Brockermeyer, and also J.C. Latham. Then the Tide will undoubtedly have the best offensive line recruiting class haul ever, adding on Amarius Mims to that impressive group. And moving over here now to another position, back to the defensive side of the football. When you look at Tamashe Adelier, if the Tide was able to pull in Adelier, who they are and play with since he decommitted from the Ohio State Buckeyes. Of course, looking at Tamashe Adelier, this is a kid who's very physical, has a quick jump off the line, a guy who really knows how to use his hands. He really likes to get around blocks with those hands. Very violent with his hands on the rush. So I think Tamashe Adelier will be another great pickup, adding him to the Tide's defensive line group, basically, as he will basically most likely play defensive end as an inline defensive end for the Crimson Tide at the next level. Adding him on with the likes of Monkel Goodwine and the Tide's defensive tackle commits and Anquin Barnes, Tim Keenan III, and Damon Payne. So Tamashe Adelier will be another great pickup for the Tide here when it comes to that dream scenario, in my opinion. And looking forward and moving forward here, the last guy I want to discuss here is a running back here in this 2021 recruiting class. Basically, most likely the top running back here in this 2021 recruiting class. When you look at 5-star running back Kamar Wheaton out of Texas, a kid with a lot of speed, a kid who runs with a lot of toughness, a kid who can make that one cut and explode into the open field, a guy with some natural athleticism to him. You add him to your 2021 recruiting class as your only running back after landing 3 running backs in the 2020 recruiting cycle. So basically, in my opinion, I think that group of guys will be a great group for the Tide to pick up here in this 2021 recruiting class. A cherry on the top for this impressive recruiting class here, adding on your Quincy Mckendree, the 5-star athlete out of Pinson Valley High School in Pinson, Alabama, adding on the Tallahassee, Florida product Interior Arnold, also adding on Amarius Mims, the 5-star offensive lineman out of Georgia, along with Kamar Wheaton, the 5-star running back out of Texas, adding them on with Thomas Dillier, 4-star defensive end out of Texas, who was supposed to play his senior season at the IMG Academy, but he will sit out. Then the cherry on the top, as I said, once again, will be 4-star wide receiver Brian Thomas Jr. I think those group of guys will be a dream scenario for how the Tide will close out their 2021 recruiting class. And as I said earlier in the show, there are so many different scenarios that could happen for the Tide here in this 2021 recruiting class. Recruiting is very fluently. Things change at the drop of a dime. 1,000 other things could quite possibly happen. So please drop in your comments who you think the Tide could land to make this a dream class in your mind. I just wanted to list a couple of guys who I think will close out the Tide's 2021 recruiting class pretty well. A dream and fantasy scenario of how the Tide's 2021 recruiting class could play out here.